I'm Sophia Alejandra, and I'm interested in marine conservation and water management in the Philippines. And currently, I have an ongoing passion project where I'm blogging on topics such as um, marine conservation, water conservation, and just overall marine life. And I also have this interview series, which is my other project, where I'm interviewing men and women who are making an impact in the environmental sector. And for the convenience of the audience, today I'm very excited to be interviewing DENR Undersecretary Celso Primo David, also known as CP David.
Carlos.
Oh, Carlos, sorry. I think it's a typo. Sorry.
But just call
Um,
me PP.
okay. And he has held multiple leadership roles, such as Executive Director of the Department of Science and Technology Philippine Council for Industry, Energy, and Emerging Technology Research and Development. He received his doctorate in environmental science and geology from one of my dream universities, Stanford University. So thank you so much, Paul, for taking the time out to meet with me.
My pleasure, Sophie.
Thank you. So I would first like to start asking you, what got you initially interested in environmental science and geology, and how was your experience studying at Stanford University?
Okay. So it has been a while, as you can imagine, but it's as if it only happened a week ago. And I remember I was in my last year of high school and I had to fill up a form, specifically the UPCAT form.
Mhm.
And one of the questions there was, what course would you want to take? And like many high school students, I did not know what to take. But for the first time, I think in my entire life, my mom um, sat down beside me and acted like a mom, and she said, "Okay, don't worry. Everyone went through this, and I will help you decide what you want to be when you grow up."
Mhm.
So what we did was to run through all the courses being offered by UP, and it was alphabetical, I remember. So it started with accounting, arts, botany, biology, etc., etc. And she'd describe each one for me. And I would say, no, I'm not interested in that. And then she was getting frustrated. So when she got to architecture, I said, okay, sounds interesting. So that we can just fill up one, no? We
Yeah.
should have to fill up three courses in there. So we put in architecture just so that there's some progress in what we were doing. And then when she got to geology, I guess the way she explained it to me kind of appealed to what I wanted to do.
Mhm.
The way she said, she described geology was something like this. She said, "Well, geologists are scientists, but they do not do their experiments inside the laboratory."
Mhm.
Okay, so I said, "So where do they go?" Well, it's because what they study are things that are outside, and this includes the mountains. And I said, "Okay, so they do mountain climbing?" Yes. And then they also go to the ocean. Oh, snorkeling and scuba diving. Yes, they do that. And also go to rivers and lakes. Oh, perfect. So they do boating and swimming in there, I guess, no? On top of their job of understanding these things. So, and then I asked her, what do they do in the mountains? Well, many of them are part of a mining company. They look for minerals, and I said, like gold, like treasure hunting? Yes, no, but in a more scientific way. And then they go to the oceans, not really to study the plants and animals there, but the processes, like where sand comes from. And I said, okay, I'm sold. I'm taking up geology. So that was a start. And when I got to geology, it did live up to how my mom explained it to me. There were a lot of field works, a lot of mountain climbing and camping and exploration and treasure hunting. And then one aspect of geology, and this was when I graduated already, really appealed to me, and that is water,
Mhm.
in terms of pollution in water, in terms of providing water to our communities, and so on and so forth. So I never looked back. It was a good decision, I would say, and up to now, I am still passionate about my field.
Well, it's very surprising that your mom had a whole list. Maybe I should do that with my mom. Very
If you
sad.
haven't decided yet, no, the UPCAT form actually included a list of all the courses that you can take,
Mm-mm.
and it was alphabetical, so we just had to do everything.
Well, I mean, it's good that you're usually dedicated to going through the whole list with you. And I
Yeah,
mean,
yep, yep, yep. And if you knew my mom, she wasn't the typical mom.
mm,
She would, very early on, she would just tell us, okay, what do you think you should do? And decide on that. And live up to the consequences if there are any. No, she was a very hands-off kind of parent.
mm,
And but that night, I needed her to be a mom.
mm, yeah. Well, I mean, it's very like interesting because I'll be going through that process like very soon.
Very
Maybe
soon.
yes, in the
Yeah,
summer
yep,
within next
yep.
year.
Okay, so if I can give you one tip or advice, it doesn't mean that if you weren't able to select the course that you will eventually uh, be doing as a job, it's fine. No, it doesn't mean that you would have to stay in that course. If you decide or if you feel that, oh, there's something else that I should be doing, by all means, no, just
Yeah.
shift or even change careers. No, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah. I mean, like no point wasting your time in something you don't
Yes.
like. Right? Yeah.
Yep. But if you do find something that you love very early on, then you get a good start, no, compared to everybody else.
Mm.
Um, and I'm sure you'll find it.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Yeah.
And then I also wanted to ask, how was your experience studying at Stanford since
Oh,
you
in
know the
Stanford.
theme of
Okay,
it?
so
Yeah.
I was in Stanford for 6 years. No, I guess I wasn't that smart because it took me 6 years to finish my degree. It was I up to now I would say I have mixed feelings with
Mm-hmm.
Stanford. I learned a lot, met a lot of friends. Definitely it helped my career finishing from a good school. But it was really tough. Tough 6 years for me. Lots of studying and a realization that I wasn't the smartest person in the class. Maybe the least smartest because everyone was smart at that time. Um, I should have maximized my time a little bit more when I was there, but I was so afraid that I won't finish my degree and come back home without a degree and disappoint everybody. So um, a lot of times I didn't enjoy the time because of I was too serious studying and trying to make sure that I finish my degree.
Yeah.
Looking back, there were a lot of things that I should have done as well. Enjoy the stay. After all, it's a journey, and it's not just about getting the degree. So that was my first mistake, and cultivated more the friendships that I had.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah. But I mean, it's very interesting though, because I mean, everyone goes to these colleges and, no one, I don't think that many people talk about what it's like and,
yeah,
with all of that pressure. So it's
yeah.
really interesting talaga to come from an Ivy League and hear about it.
Mhm, mhm. If you
But,
ever go to an Ivy League school or any of the really big schools, that's my tip for you.
mm,
If you were my child, I would say don't stress too much. No, it's the experience of living by yourself and being with all these other people, uh, whom many of whom would be your lifelong friends.
mm, yeah, for sure.
So yes, do study, but make a lot of friends.
Yeah, I'll keep it in mind.
Sige,
I have 2 more years pa.
2 more years.
Mm,
Or maybe you'll do college here first and then
yeah,
do masters abroad.
yeah. So we'll see.
That would be ideal.
Mm.
Yeah.
So for my next question naman,
Okay.
I really want to hear like what was your most challenging environmental related project that you worked on in your career, and specifically like coming off from the Stanford perspective, like were there any specific learnings from Stanford that applied to this really hard challenge in your career?
Artist challenge. Most difficult, I would say, was the project I did on a mining company called Mar Copper in the
Mhm.
island of Marinduque. Um, and so I went to Marinduque for 3 straight summers, understanding the pollution that was brought upon by a mine spill
Mhm.
in the Mar Copper mine. The challenge there wasn't the science at all, but in explaining to people what is happening in the environment and how can we overcome the issues that we were facing at that time. That the river was polluted. Uh, many times people would just concentrate on who to blame, no,
Mhm.
instead of okay, what is the solution, and let's get past the issue of who to blame and start just acting and cleaning up the river. I think it's that part of explaining I wasn't ready yet. No, I knew the science, but uh, it's different when you talk to the people who were affected. You can talk to them at the science level. For example, after 3 years, the river actually healed itself, no,
Oh,
without any intervention from people.
mhm.
And people didn't want to hear that because they wanted to blame somebody uh, and that they have to pay. No, so every time I say that actually nature helped us and this part of the river is already cleaned up, they didn't want to do anything with that. So explaining another explanation that was quite obvious to us as a scientist, but as a person living there was another site in the island wherein the marine environment was contaminated by mining stuff.
Oh,
And the people there were, had um, elevated um, lead levels. No, there
mhm.
was lead in their blood.
Oh, okay.
Yes, and these were fisher folks, and they said, okay, their lead levels are quite high. The only problem is that Marcopper is not a lead mine; it's a copper mine. There
Yeah.
were no elevated copper in their blood, and there's no lead in Marcopper.
Oh, yeah.
And yet, to them, okay, the only thing that is wrong in this environment is that there's a mining company, and I am sick for whatever metal. But science just tells us that the lead is not coming from the mine because there's no lead there.
Mhm.
The lead is actually coming from the exhaust of the tricycles
Oh, yeah.
and the gasoline that they use to power their boats.
Mhm.
But of course, they wouldn't accept that explanation that
Mhm.
it's not being brought upon by this mining company. Uh, which they wanted to sue. No, so the science and the social part, no, they're different. And siguro on hindsight, I should have explained it much better to them.
Yeah, I think, and that's kind of like the problem nowadays is that you can have all the scientific data in the world, but then
Mhm.
people still have to accept it. And I think,
Exactly.
that's why there's
Oh,
a lot of the environmental progress is just being stunted because it's one thing to have the data, but it's another thing to be open-minded. And I really
agree.
think that's what society needs. Because I mean, you have all of these people telling you this is what's wrong with our planet, this is what we should do, but
Mhm.
society in itself hasn't really been open to the idea of changing everything. Because
The
we believe that
problem,
it feels like, flipping our world upside down.
I know. So the problem is that if you continue to think that this is the cause of your problem, you will never solve the issue.
Yeah.
Because you would say, this is a problem, but where in fact the problem is actually right in front of you that
Mhm.
you fail to recognize or refuse to recognize. No,
Yeah.
so as a scientist, we look at things objectively and black and white. This is the cause and this is the result. By removing the cause, this is how you will solve the problem. But
Mhm.
if the cause that you are harping on is not the real cause, then it will never solve your problem.
Yeah. I think
So,
it's the environmental challenge of changing perspectives. Yeah.
yep, mindset is different from just providing facts. No, there's
Yeah.
something else, no, to change somebody's mindset.
Yeah. So I guess just moving forward, just society needs to start taking responsibility and being open minded to these new discoveries. Yeah.
Yep.
Hmm. Okay. So for the next question,
Yeah.
what are some major technological advancements that the DNR has witnessed in the last couple of years, and how much of an impact did these advancements make?
Hmm. I will be a bit biased here, but
Mm.
in January of 2023, our secretary formed a new office called the Geospatial Database Office, where I am at right now. So I lead
Oh.
the GDO, and the GDO is tasked to look for tools, new tools and technologies in managing the environment and our natural resources. So we gravitate towards satellite imagery and computer programs that help us analyze things. You see, when we try to manage, for example, forest,
Mm.
the typical and traditional way would be to go to the forest and start measuring the number of trees, etc., etc. But it would take so much time. And so, what we have been doing is using photographs from space and analyzing issues, from space even before we go to the actual forest.
Wow.
And this hastens the entire process, um, and cut down on costs. And so today, fast forward, no, after about 18 months, our team has grown to about 15 people, all looking at
Mm.
satellite images, and creating tools in managing the environment. So we do forest. We recently completed the mapping of our mangroves,
Mm.
and you can look for it in online. Um, and if we do it traditionally, the traditional way, it would have taken us 20 years to map out our mangrove forest. We also finished mapping out all the rivers, lakes, and dams of the Philippines. All in all, uh, about 7,000 rivers. So those are completely mapped out. And these maps here that we have produced feed into either the development of the resource like water or protection of the environment.
Mm. Well, it's actually really interesting though because everyone is coming up with these satellite images, whether it's like like simply like mapping out the streets to create ways, and then
Yep.
now it's like feeding into the environmental sector,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really great that it's cutting down on cost because I think most people would like to assume that, oh yeah, more advancements means it's more expensive, and it's like all this hard detail, but now it's
Mm-hmm.
making it more convenient and even more cost effective.
Yeah, on the contrary, our budget for our office is 5 million pesos. That takes care of everybody's salary and computers and all the expenses.
Hmm.
And so what I try to do is for every, we call them use cases, for every project that each of the 15 GIS operators or satellite image analysts would do. They would have different projects. At any point in time, they'd be doing three or four. I would now cost the output of each of those projects. And one project alone actually saved the department 400 million pesos
Oh, wow.
just by doing the project using
Yeah.
satellite imagery. And just with that, we would have paid everyone's salary you know, almost 100 times, 80 times over.
Yeah.
So that's my way of ensuring the department that, our department or our office here is sulit. No, you pay
Yeah.
us 5 million and we give you 400 million from just one project, and we have 40 or so projects, no, each having their contributions.
Yeah.
Another project, simple one, and your mom would know this.
Mm.
Um, we have 23,000 permittees to use water.
Oh, okay.
Water in the country, whether it is in the form of rain, groundwater, river, etc., all belong to the state, belongs to government,
Yeah.
not to the owner of the land.
Mm.
And we provide a water permit for these people to use that water. So now there are 23,000 users of water for various purposes, including your mom's company.
Mm.
The problem is that that data set, that those 23,000 had a lot of errors in terms of where or the location of these rivers or deep wells are. They're
Mm.
all over the place. Now, sometimes they would plot in the ocean or in Kenya or wherever. No, so they're incorrect. And I asked the office that manages this, and they said, it will take so much time to go through the 23,000 permittees and make sure that they are in the complete location.
Mm.
That's what they told me. And I said, okay. So I turned to one of my staff here. Here's the data. Obviously, some of the coordinates, the location of these points are incorrect. Can you correct them? And she thought for a while and she said, okay, I'll think of something. After 1 week, she comes back to me with the entire data set corrected.
Mm.
So I said, wow, what did you do? Did you overtime? No, should I pay you for going through the 23,000? No, I didn't go through the 23,000. No. And she said, I made a code, a program to try to look for inconsistencies in the data wherein the address does not match with the coordinates. And
Mm.
that is how I isolated first all those that are incorrect.
Yeah.
And she was able to limit something like 3,000 out of the 23,000 that were incorrect. And from these, I looked at the data again and did another process to correct the coordinates, and it took me 1 hour. And here's the data set for it. So
Yeah.
I said, okay, how much does this cost? No, the cost for us was 1 week of our time,
Mm.
but for the agency who did not have the foresight to do coding and look at the data differently instead of just going through each one by one. No, this is something valuable. So we turned it over and they said, wow, bilis, gawa na. That's what you get with uh, people who look at the problem differently and offering a solution that would be different from typical person.
Yeah. What's actually really interesting to hear, it's like very the cost of it is very surprising and the speed of it is very surprising because I think typically for me as a student they make you read studies that were tested
Mm.
over years, and for something to be like this fast is actually like so surprising because it's not talked about very much. We always, I think the conversation it typically centers around what's going to happen or the possibility, but hearing it actually work out was really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, it did work out, and we now have a data set that's corrected,
Mm.
which this agency had a hard time figuring out. Now, at one point, they said maybe we should hire a consultant, worth 1 million, or maybe we should hire a battalion of encoders just to go through the 23,000 data set.
Mm.
And it took just one person about a week to figure things out.
It's really impressive, and it just goes to show how much developments there have been over the years.
Hmm.
And yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, hopefully, people watching this will be enlightened to know that there are like fast-paced solutions now, and
Mm,
the possibilities we had years ago are actually coming true now.
yeah, yeah. So my tip to whoever will watch this is if you're faced with a problem and it seems that the problem will take days and days to solve, no, take a step back, look at the whole problem and see if there are any other solutions that would not force you to just go through that data one at a time, but maybe employ a program or some software to
Yeah,
help you with the problem.
yeah. And then I also wanted to ask, like, how did you feel? I mean, this is more on like a career side more than technological side, but
Mhm.
how did you feel shifting from from a technology centered role to an environmental centered role? And did your background in technology help with that?
Mm, I never left the technology part or the science part, even if I'm now more policy and government
Yeah.
uh, work. It feeds to the work that I have, and it's I would say a core advantage on my part that I know the science aspect, so
Yeah.
that when I apply it as a policy, then it comes out different.
Yeah.
Um, Prior to joining the DNR, I was a professor in UP, still is. I'm just on leave from UP. And my university life naman, uh, I would say once I go back to UP after DNR, would have been enriched also with the experience I have with the policy and dealing with government and real world problems that we face.
Yeah.
Example, last when was that? Last Friday. Last Friday, there was because there was a big rain event again,
Yeah.
because of Typhoon Enteng and Marikina and Rizal province were flooded, and everyone, of course, had an opinion. And so, in a cabinet uh, meeting, the president said, "Okay, who can explain what's happening here? How come the rains weren't that strong and yet the floods were really high?"
Mhm.
And out of all the secretaries, our secretary said, "Okay, we have an explanation." Sec Tony said, and I call on you, Sec CP, to explain. So I had to explain to all the secretaries that, okay, and it's science based. And basically, I said that, okay, all floods come from heavy rains, but not all heavy rains would have to result to flooding. So,
Mhm.
what are the other factors that we can control? Because obviously, we can't control rain,
Mhm.
that we can control and not convert all that rain into flooding.
Mhm.
So, I think everyone got that, and appreciated a different viewpoint to flooding.
Yeah, and I think it's just like the layers of background that do help you now with policy making, I suppose.
It's more, yeah, yung science background, to a professor, it's simple, but I think the more difficult part there is translating that science to something that the policymakers will understand, no? Not having all the technical background and actionable. Okay,
Yeah.
so if this is the case, what then should be our action?
Yeah.
And I'm learning as I go along the way, and ensuring that the science is there, but it's translated to action right after.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen like a similar pattern that you'd have to explain it to people who don't have that scientific or technological background. And it
Mm.
really goes to show like that, that gap needs to be bridged properly, like moving forward with environmental problems, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. I think in any field, no, um, those who know the field very well wouldn't be the ones who can explain it uh, best.
Yeah.
Kasi nga, they will be bogged down on the technical part of things. No? So I just try to be conscious that, okay, I can go into more of the details of hydrology and flood velocity, but that won't be as important as, okay, once I convince them that I'm correct, what now is the next action? I
Yeah,
think that's more important.
definitely. And then I also wanted to ask, in your opinion, what are the key water-related issues in the Philippines? And can you tell me a bit about how the DNR is responding to these?
Most important problem is that every Filipino should have access to safe drinking water,
Mhm.
first and foremost. And then after that, a distant second, sanitation, meaning that water that we use gets to be treated prior to it being discharged into a lake or a river. That's a second objective. Third objective, making sure that our bodies of water are not polluted,
Yeah.
no, and so we can go down the line. But I think most important is that everyone has access to safe drinking water.
Yeah.
And your mom's company is doing a
Mhm.
great job, doing that. And if I may say so, there are a lot of communities, large communities, wherein it's economically viable for a big company to come in and provide water to everyone just because there are a lot of people. Okay.
Yeah.
And it makes business sense. Now, your mom's company would also go into even smaller communities that other companies would say, I won't make money from that. And
Mhm.
she makes it work
Yeah.
by providing water, but at the same time, sustaining the operations. Hindi naman
Yeah.
lugi like it's charity work. No?
Yeah.
So that's very difficult.
Mhm.
On my part, I think so far my biggest contribution is that um, while a lot of communities, cities, are grappling with not having enough water, I am trying to find them the source of water that can be developed
Yeah.
for their water supply, which were not pinpointed, identified prior to my time. No, so
Mhm.
everyone just accepted, there's no water in this area.
Mhm.
And one of the strategies I found was to look for other users of water, particularly agriculture,
Yeah.
and utilize that water both for agriculture and for drinking water.
Mhm.
So no one thought of that. And from the data that I was analyzing, this is the only viable way of providing water to large communities.
Yeah.
You see, the water that we use for irrigation for our farms, they are not used 24/7, 365 days of the year
Mhm.
because we don't have crops naman every single day. In fact, they don't even irrigate during the rainy season because all the farms are rain fed anyway.
Yeah.
And so the water in the dams, for example, for irrigation, are not utilized for any other purpose because it used to be just for irrigation. And because there was no need for irrigation at that time, the water was just flowing.
Mhm.
In the meantime, you have large communities right beside these facilities that needed water, except that they can't get water from that because that was reserved for irrigation.
Yeah.
So a piece of policy I made was to convert all this water, not just for irrigation purposes, but I made it everything multi-purpose use. So
Uh,
depending on what is the requirement at that point in time, you can now utilize that water for irrigation or for drinking water or even for hydropower and so on and so forth. So that opened something like 247 projects. And what we were talking about earlier, no, your mom and I, was that they now have pinpointed two of the 247 that they're interested in developing. These are irrigation water that they will now convert to potable water.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
any project that happens through that scheme, I'm happy
Yeah.
because people would get water, um, and and that we get to maximize the resource that we have.
Yeah. And actually, I worked with my mom nga last summer in her company. I did the
Yeah.
internship program with her, and
Yeah.
seeing all of that, like like seeing the pipes being placed and
Mm,
testing, it was really like interesting. But getting to know it from this perspective, and
mm.
how many people it reaches is like it really is inspirational. And
It does. It does. And if I will take 1 minute now to explain how important water is,
yeah,
it is the most basic primary service that you will have to provide to communities, even before food, internet, electricity, education, and so on. Now, it's the most basic requirement. And without that, everything actually tumbles down. Just if you follow this argument, no, if I don't have access to clean water, no, it's contaminated, I would always have tummy problems, no, diarrhea, and so on and so forth. Now,
mhm,
what I didn't know is that a person who will have regular tummy problems and diarrhea will slowly change the gut composition, no, the
yeah,
stomach composition, so that it won't be affected by bacteria in the water. Okay. So the way I envision that is that the lining of the stomach gets to be thicker, and so bacteria won't pass through the lining of the stomach.
yeah,
Okay, so they won't be affected by contaminated water anymore. However, every time they eat, no, even with nutritious food, because the stomach is now different, the stomach of these people will now absorb less nutrients even if you feed them nutritious food, just because of that change, no, of that was brought upon by water that's contaminated. So if you don't absorb nutrients anymore, you will always be malnourished, and the first organ to be affected by malnourishment would be our brains. And the brain will now be stunted. And even if you have food and now clean water and even good education, if the brain is compromised, then you will never have a person that will grow to his or her full potential, just because his entire system was compromised because of poor drinking water. So it
yeah.
boils down to that.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, like as a developing country, like we want our people to improve and also like our systems to improve.
And it's too late if we try to intervene in school
Yeah,
when that child actually grew up with, having bouts of diarrhea and having changed his gut already.
yeah.
So
I think,
that's my battle cry of
yeah,
why I want to provide as many people, drinking water that's clean, because I know it's going to affect a lot of the other aspects of that person's life.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, and then also my mom does talk about it a lot.
She
All
does.
these. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's like such
Well,
a
we're all the same. Everyone
yeah,
in the water sector, we're just, super focused. This is
yeah.
something that we have to do. And if it's the only thing we will do for the rest of our lives, so be it. No, that
Yeah.
single-minded focus.
Yeah. And I mean, like, I think everyone, like, in terms of perspectives, like, we just think, oh, the water keeps flowing. Like, as long as we pay our water bills, like, it'll be okay. Like, no matter how much we dispose our trash or whatever, we're still getting it. So I
Yeah.
think, like, the fact that we're still, like, getting water now, people have not adjusted to the idea that water is, like, getting more and more scarce and, it's
Oh,
worth it.
yeah, and if we're all the same, no? Water is the most important thing, no, even if there are other problems around us, no, health, COVID, or whatever, corruption, no?
Mhm.
Water pa rin yung kailangan makunan.
Yeah.
Yan.
And then, actually, we moved on to the last question now.
Okay.
So, what message would you give to students who wish to pursue a similar path to yours, especially the youth who want to study environment and technology and possibly work in government-related roles?
Well, that is a difficult question, because it is difficult because it has to come from the person himself
Mhm.
or herself. You know, the passion to do a certain thing, whether it be in science or the arts or business, no, the passion has to be there. You know,
Yeah.
just be the best you can in that field. And it doesn't matter what field you select. Of course, uh, I'd be super happy, you know, if any of your viewers would say, okay, why don't I try science? No, because science is not just doing lab work and computing things. No, it
Yeah.
does have real world impacts, and a lot of the problems that we are facing, the solutions are in science. No,
Yes.
at least at the very start, at the very core of it, it has to be science based, and then uh, later on you would have to put in the business part and the social part, the finance part, and so on. But at the core of it, the solution is always going to be science related.
Yeah.
So yeah, just go with what you are passionate about, whether it's poetry or sports, business, culinary stuff, or science. Just be the best,
Yeah.
you know, in the field.
Yeah.